Jackson Reeve had been drifting through the Belmont asteroid field for 6 hours, and his patience was thinner than recycled air. The scrap runner groaned around him, its hull patched with 17 different alloys and held together by spite and electromagnetic tape. Through the cockpit's cracked viewport, tumbling rocks caught starlight like broken teeth. "Anything out there worth my time?" He muttered to the ship's II, a cranky subroutine he'd nicknamed Grudge. "Define worth," Grudge replied in its perpetually sarcastic tone. "If you mean something that won't explode when you touch it, probably." "Not." Jackson sighed and adjusted the salvage scanner. Most of the debris in this sector was worthless chunks of ice, twisted metal from mining accidents, the occasional frozen corpse in an expired life suit. But something had pinged on his long-range sensors 12 hours ago, something big enough to warrant investigation and desperate enough to ignore the radiation warnings. That's when he saw it. The derelict hung suspended between two asteroids, like a metal spider in a web of cosmic dust. Its design was wrong, not human, not Voltani, not any configuration he recognized from 30 years of scrapping dead ships. The hull curved in impossible spirals, its surface shifting between colors that had no names. "Well," Jackson said, "that's new. That's dangerous," Grudge corrected. "Unknown vessel, unknown technology, unknown probability of it deciding to dissolve. Your molecular structure for fun. Unknown profit potential," Jackson countered, maneuvering closer. "Scan it." The results made him frown. The ship registered as both there and not there, existing in a quantum flux that shouldn't be possible with current physics. Its power core was dead, but energy signatures danced across its hull like aurora. "Life signs?" He asked. "Negative." "Also positive." "Also maybe." "The readings are giving me a headache, and I don't technically have a brain." Jackson suited up and crossed the void between ships, magnetic boots clanking against the alien hull. The airlock recognized his approach somehow and cycled open with a soft whisper. Inside, bioluminescent strips provided dim lighting, revealing corridors that stretched in directions his eyes insisted weren't geometrically possible. He found the bridge after 10 minutes of walking in what felt like circles. Crystalline consoles pulsed weakly, and floating displays showed star charts of constellations he'd never seen. At the center of it all sat a pedestal holding a sphere of pure light, no bigger than his fist. Jackson reached for it, hesitated, then grabbed it anyway. The moment his gloves made contact, the sphere dissolved into his suit systems, and every display in the ship flared to life. Text scrolled across the screen's alien script that shifted and flowed like living water. But somehow, impossibly, he could read it. Not with his eyes, but with something deeper. The symbols burned themselves into his consciousness, and among them, repeated over and over, was something that made his blood run cold. His name, Jackson Reeve, written in letters that predated human language by millennia. "That's not possible," he whispered. "Many things aren't possible," said a voice behind him. "Yet here we are." Jackson spun, hand reaching for his plasma cutter. A woman stood in the doorway, tall and lean, with silver hair that caught the crystal light. Her suit was form-fitting, made of materials that seemed to shift between solid and liquid. Most striking were her eyes deep violet, with pupils that reflected stars. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Nissa," she said, stepping closer. "And you're Jackson Reeve, quantum signature 7741 Alpha Prime, fixed point class designation." She nodded toward the displays. "I've been looking for you." "Looking for me?" "Lady, I don't even know what half those words mean." "You will." Nissa touched one of the consoles, and the alien text began organizing itself into recognizable patterns. "Your quantum signature exists across 17 different timeline branches. In most of them, you die young. In a few, you never exist at all. But in the ones that matter, you're always here. Always finding this ship. Always asking the same questions. Jackson stared at the scrolling data. Among the incomprehensible symbols, he caught glimpses of other names, other signatures. People he'd never met, but somehow felt he should know. "What does it mean?" he asked. Nissa's expression grew grim. "It means reality is breaking down. The barriers between dimensions are failing, and when they collapse completely, everything, every timeline, every possibility gets erased. Signatures are anchor points, people whose existence helps hold it all together. And you're telling me I'm one of these anchor points. You're one of the most important ones." She gestured to the ship around them. "This vessel belongs to the architects, the ones who built the original quantum framework. They're gone now, but they left instructions. Guidance for people like you." Jackson felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's failing life support. People like me. Fixed points. The ones who don't bend when reality shifts. The ones who remember when others forget. Nissa moved to another console, her fingers dancing across controls that shouldn't exist. But remembering makes you targets. There are things out there, entities from collapsed timelines that want to erase the anchor points. They call themselves collectors, but I call them what they are. Scavengers feeding on broken universes. A ship shuddered around them, and Jackson's suit began picking up new energy signatures, approaching from the asteroid field. Multiple contacts, moving in formation, their quantum resonance making his scanner scream warnings. "They found us," Nissa said simply. Jackson grabbed his gear. "How many?" "Enough." She was already moving toward the exit. "We need to get to your ship. There's someone you need to meet, a scholar who's been studying these signatures for longer than anyone. He might have answers." "What kind of answers?" Nissa paused at the airlock, her star-filled eyes meeting his. "A kind that might save everything, or damn it all forever." As they prepared to flee into the void, Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that his life as a simple salvage operator had just ended, and something far more dangerous and important had begun. The collectors were coming, and apparently, he was exactly what they were hunting for. Professor Thane Corvus had spent 43 years staring at dead languages, and tonight, one of them was staring back. His laboratory aboard research station Kepler-9 resembled an organized catastrophe holographic, displays showing ancient. Ruin scans floated between towers of data tablets, while crystalline artifacts from a dozen worlds caught the artificial starlight streaming through the observation deck. Thane sat hunched over his primary workstation, silver beard unkempt, eyes red from too much caffeine and too little sleep. The transmission from Jackson Reeve had arrived 16 hours ago, a data burst containing quantum signatures and alien script that made his pulse quicken. The symbols matched fragments he'd been translating from the Ocean ruins on Kepler 7b text, so old it predated most known civilizations by eons. "Computer, cross-reference pattern group 7 with the Ocean." "Temple inscriptions," he commanded, his voice hoarse. "Cross-reference complete," the station AI replied in its clipped, professional tone. "Confidence match, 97.4%. Thane leaned back, heart hammering. For decades, he'd theorized that the Oceans weren't just another extinct species, but something far more significant. Architects of reality itself, builders of the quantum framework that held the multiverse together. Now he had proof. The script floating before him told a story of cosmic engineering, how the Oceans had identified individuals across infinite timelines whose existence created stability points, anchor nodes that prevented dimensional collapse. They called them the tethered ones, beings whose quantum signatures resonated across multiple realities simultaneously. "My God," Thane whispered, scrolling through the data. They were mapping fixed points throughout time. He pulled up his personal research files, decades of work on temporal mechanics and dimensional theory. If the ocean texts were accurate, then consciousness itself played a role in maintaining reality's structure. Certain individuals, through some quirk of quantum biology, existed as constants across timeline branches, and their presence prevented the entire system from unraveling. Thane's hands trembled as he accessed the restricted files he'd never shown his colleagues. During his early career, he'd experienced what he called temporal echoes, moments where he remembered things that never happened, saw places that didn't exist, felt the weight of lives he'd never lived. His peers had dismissed it as academic stress, but Thane knew better. He'd always been different, always been tethered. The lab's proximity sensors chimed, indicating an incoming vessel. Thane frowned. No ships were scheduled to dock for another 6 days. He brought up the external cameras and saw a sleek craft approaching, its hull shifting between visible wavelengths like liquid mercury. Computer, identify incoming vessel. Vessel configuration unknown. Quantum resonance patterns match no known database entries. Thane's blood chilled. After reading Jackson's data, he knew what unknown quantum patterns might mean. He activated the station's defensive protocols, sealing the laboratory and sending an emergency beacon toward the inner colonies. The ship docked with mechanical precision, and within minutes, his security monitors showed figures moving through the station corridors. They wore form-fitting suits that seemed to absorb light, their faces hidden behind masks that reflected impossible geometries. But it was their movement that terrified him. They walked through walls as if matter was merely a suggestion, phasing in and out of solidity at will. Collectors. The entities Nyssa had warned Jackson about, the scavengers from collapsed timelines. Thane sealed himself in the laboratory's inner sanctum, a reinforced chamber designed to withstand cosmic radiation and meteor impacts. But as he watched the security feeds, he realized physical barriers meant nothing to beings who existed partially outside normal spacetime. That's when she appeared. Nyssa materialized in his lab without triggering any alarms, stepping out of what looked like a fold in reality itself. Her violet eyes swept the room, taking in his research displays with practiced efficiency. "Professor Corvus," she said, her voice carrying an odd harmonic that made the air shimmer. "I'm sorry I'm late." "Late for what?" Thane demanded, backing against his workstation. "And how did you get past my security?" "Quantum phase shifting. Useful skill when you're being hunted across 17 dimensions." Nyssa moved to his displays, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. "And I'm late because the collectors found you before I could establish a protective perimeter." The laboratory shuddered as something massive impacted the outer hull. Through the security feeds, Thane watched the corridor walls ripple like water as more collector entities phased through the station structure. "What do they want?" he asked. "To erase you." Nyssa's hands moved with practiced efficiency, downloading his research data into a crystalline storage device. Every fixed point they eliminate weakens reality's structure. When enough anchor points are gone, the barriers between timelines collapse, and they can feed on the resulting chaos. Feed on chaos? Collapsed realities generate massive amounts of quantum energy. The collectors are parasites. They destroy universes to sustain themselves. Nyssa finished the download and turned to him. "Your research is crucial, Professor. You've mapped more fixed points than anyone else alive." Through the reinforced walls, Thane heard the distinctive hum of matter dissolution. The collectors were cutting through his defenses like they were paper. He grabbed his emergency kit and the most important research tablets. "There's something else," he said, pulling up a final display. The Ashen texts mention a nexus point, a location where all timeline branches converge. If the fixed points could be brought together there, they could reinforce the entire quantum framework. Nyssa finished. "Reset the barriers. Lock out the collectors permanently. Her expression grew grim. But the nexus only opens during cascade events, when reality is already failing. The inner sanctum's door began to glow cherry red as the collectors focused their dissolution beams. Thane could see their shapes through the melting metal, humanoid figures that hurt to look at directly, as if his brain couldn't process their geometry. Nissa grabbed his arm. "Time to go, Professor." "Go where?" "They've surrounded us." She smiled, and for a moment, her form flickered like a bad hologram. Not all of us are limited to 3 dimensions. The world twisted around Thane, reality folding in on itself, like origami made of space-time. He felt his consciousness stretch across multiple possibilities simultaneously. In one, he died as the collectors breached his sanctum. In another, he escaped but lost his research. In a third, he never became a scholar at all. Then they were elsewhere, standing in the cargo bay of a ship he didn't recognize. The walls hummed with quantum energy, and through the viewports, he could see Kepler 9 station already fading into the distance. "Welcome aboard the probability's edge," Issa said, leading him toward the bridge. "There's someone you need to meet, a courier named Zara Voss. She's been having the same temporal echoes you experienced, and her ship's AI has been displaying Ashen script during hyperspace jumps." Thane steadied himself against a bulkhead as the ship's quantum drive engaged. "How many of us are there?" "Fixed points? Hundreds, maybe thousands across all timelines. But active, aware individuals who can help stabilize the framework." Nissa's expression darkened. "Fewer every day. The collectors are systematic in their hunting." As they traveled through the space between spaces, Thane clutched his research data and wondered if knowledge was enough to save reality itself. Somewhere ahead, other fixed points were going about their lives, unaware that existence hung by quantum threads, and that those threads were being cut, one, by entities that fed on universal collapse. The next phase of their impossible mission was about to begin. Zara Voss had been flying the hyperspace lanes for 12 years, and her ship had never tried to speak ancient languages before. The Stellar Drift was a modified courier vessel, built for speed and discretion rather than comfort. Its eye, Witch, she'd nicknamed Ghost for its tendency to appear in conversations uninvited, had always been chatty but predictable. Today, it was neither. "Ghost, run another diagnostic on the navigation array," Zara called from the pilot's seat, watching me. Swirling vortex of hyperspace through her viewport. "Something's been off since we entered the Cascade Nebula." "Diagnostic complete," Ghost replied, but its voice carried an odd harmonic that made the cabin lights flicker. "All systems nominal. Though I should mention, I've been having the most fascinating dreams." Zara frowned. "A is don't dream. Apparently this one does. Would you like to see?" Before she could protest, the main display lit up with symbols that hurt to look at, flowing, organic script that seemed to move of its own accord. The characters pulsed with inner light, and despite never having seen them before, Zara found herself understanding fragments of their meaning. Anchor ... tethered ... The spaces between. Ghost, where did this come from? I'm not entirely sure. The patterns began appearing during our last hyperspace jump, embedded in the quantum foam readings. They seemed to be ... addressing you specifically. Zara felt a chill run down her spine. Her name appeared among the symbols, written in letters that predated human civilization. But more disturbing were the other names scattered throughout the text people she'd never met but somehow felt she should know. Jackson Reeve, Thane Corvus, Marcus Holt. "This is impossible," she muttered, running her fingers through her short-cropped auburn hair. Dead languages don't just appear in navigation systems. That's when the first reality glitch hit. The hyperspace tunnel around them stuttered, like a skipped frame in a holographic recording. For an instant, Zara saw herself in the pilot's seat, but older, wearing different clothes, flying a ship she didn't recognize. Then the moment snapped back to normal, leaving her gasping. "Ghost, did you register that anomaly?" "What anomaly?" "All readings are steady." But Ghost's voice now carried harmonics that sounded almost concerned. Zara pulled up the ship's sensor logs, searching for any indication of what she'd experienced. Instead, she found something worse. The stellar drift had been broadcasting. A quantum signature she'd never authorized, a signal that painted her location across multiple dimensional frequencies. "We're being tracked," she realized. "Someone's using our own hyperspace wake to follow us." "Multiple contacts detected," Ghost confirmed, its voice now purely mechanical. "Emerging from fold space in 3.2.1. The hyperspace tunnel exploded into chaos as 5 ships materialized around them. They were wrong in every way that mattered: hulls that bent light around them, propulsion systems that moved through dimensions rather than space, and weapon signatures that registered as pure entropy. Collectors. Zara threw the stellar drift into an evasive spiral, pushing the modified engines past their safety limits. The collector ships moved like liquid mercury, flowing around her attacks and matching her every maneuver with impossible precision. "Ghost, plot a jump to the Kepler system. Maximum burn." "Negative. Hyperspace destabilization detected. Jumping now would tear us apart at the molecular level." Through her rear sensors, Zara watched one of the collector ships extend what looked like a proboscis made of crystallized void. Where it touched space, reality simply stopped existing, leaving behind a wound in the universe that hurt to perceive. "They're trying to erase us," she whispered. That's when the probability's edge dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of her, its sleek hull gleaming with quantum shielding. Weapon ports opened along its flanks, and beams of coherent possibility struck the collector ships, causing them to flicker between dimensions. "Zaravos," came a transmission on a frequency she'd never used, but somehow recognized. "This is Nyssa. Follow my lead, and don't deviate from my flight path." The collectors can track quantum signatures, but not through a properly shielded corridor. Zara didn't hesitate. She fell into formation behind the mystery ship as it carved a path through the chaos, its weapons creating stable channels in the deteriorating spacetime around them. The collector ships pursued, but their attacks seemed to slide off Nyssa's vessel like water off quantum glass. "Who are you?" Zara transmitted back. "Someone who's been looking for you, and someone who's about to save your life." The probability's edge opened a hyperspace rift that glowed with impossible colors, and Zara followed it through just as the collector ships converged on their position. On the other side, they emerged in normal space near a moon-sized research station. "Dock with Bay 7, Nyssa instructed. "There are people you need to meet." 20 minutes later, Zara found herself in a conference room that defied architectural logic. Sitting across from a grizzled salvage operator and an elderly professor whose eyes held the weight of decades. Nyssa stood at the head of the table, no longer bothering to hide the fact that she occasionally flickered between dimensions. "Fixed points," Professor Corvus was explaining, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Individuals whose quantum signatures create stability nodes across multiple timelines. Your ship's AI has been translating Ashen script because it's been exposed to quantum resonance from your own consciousness." Jackson leaned forward. "So we're all connected somehow." "More than connected," Nyssa said. "You're part of the same system. The Ashens built the multiverse's framework around anchor points like you. When enough fixed points are eliminated, the barriers between realities collapse." Zara stared at the alien script still scrolling across her personal tablet. "And these collectors are trying to erase us, systematically. They've already destroyed 17 timeline branches, feeding on the energy released when realities collapse." Nyssa gestured to a holographic display showing branching timelines, many ending in violent termination. But there's a way to stop them. A nexus point where all timeline branches converge. If we can bring enough fixed points together there, we can reinforce the entire quantum framework. Where is this nexus? Jackson asked. The Ashen homeworld in the Corona sector. But it's defended by automated systems that activate only during cascade events, when reality is already failing. Corvus pulled up star charts showing a system surrounded by spatial anomalies. We'd have to wait until the collector's trigger. Another collapse, then reach the nexus before the framework fails completely. Zara felt her ship's eye chiming for attention through her neural link. Ghost's voice whispered in her mind, carrying harmonics that sounded increasingly alien. The patterns are accelerating. Something big is coming. Something that will make. The previous attacks look like probing actions. Ghost is detecting massive quantum distortions, she reported aloud. Whatever the collectors are planning, it's about to happen. Nissa nodded grimly. Then we need to gather every fixed point we can find. There's a military officer named Marcus Holt, whose tactical implants have been displaying Ashen script. He's leading a defense fleet against collector incursions in the Outer Rim. How do we reach him? Corvus asked. Zara stood, feeling the familiar pull of hyperspace calling to her. Leave that to me. The Stellar Drift may not be the biggest ship in the fleet, but she's fast, and now that Ghost is translating Ashen navigation protocols, we can travel through quantum channels the collectors can't follow. As they prepared for what might be their final mission, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that her life as a simple courier had been preparation for this moment. Somewhere in the Outer Rim, Captain Marcus Holt was fighting a war he didn't understand, holding the line against entities that fed on collapsed realities. It was time to bring him into the fold before the collectors succeeded in erasing them all. Captain Marcus Holt had been fighting impossible enemies for 3 months, and today they had become truly impossible. The bridge of the dreadnought Iron, resolve hummed with controlled chaos as his crew coordinated the defense of the Tharsis mining colonies. Through the main viewport, Marcus watched reality tear itself apart. Void black ships emerged from wounds in space, their hulls drinking starlight and leaving nothing behind but quantum static. Enemy formation Delta 7 is phasing through. Our shields again, reported Lieutenant Commander Hayes from the tactical station. Conventional weapons are having minimal effect. Marcus studied the holographic battlefield display, his cybernetic implants processing trajectory data faster than human consciousness could follow. For weeks, his neural interfaces had been malfunctioning, displaying alien script that his brain somehow translated automatically. The patterns suggested tactical solutions that shouldn't exist, strategies for fighting enemies that existed partially outside normal spacetime. All ships, implement dispersal pattern 7 Alpha, he commanded. Target their dimensional anchor. Points, not their hulls. Sir, dispersal pattern 7 Alpha isn't in our tactical database, Hayes replied. Marcus paused. The formation had come to him instinctively, along with targeting solutions his implants claimed were impossible. Implement it anyway. Trust me on this one. The Colonial Defense Fleet scattered into a complex 3-dimensional formation that looked random but felt perfectly orchestrated. When the collector ships pursued, they found themselves caught in overlapping fields of fire that targeted their quantum coherence nodes, the points where they maintained stability across dimensions. Direct hits on 3 enemy vessels. The weapons officer reported with obvious surprise. They're destabilizing? Falling back into normal space? Marcus felt a grim satisfaction as the collector ships became vulnerable to conventional weapons. Whatever was happening to his implants, it was giving him tactical insights that actually worked against these reality-warping entities. That's when the stellar drift dropped out of hyperspace in the middle of the battle. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Holt of the Colonial Defense Force, Marcus transmitted. You're entering an active combat zone. Withdraw immediately. Captain. Halt. This is Zara Voss aboard the Stellar Drift. I have Professor Corvus, Jackson Reeve, and someone called Nissa, who says you're in terrible danger. Marcus frowned. Those names triggered something in his implant's recognition patterns he'd never programmed. Say that again. You're a fixed point, Captain. An anchor that helps hold reality together. And right now, you're fighting a war against entities that want to erase you from existence. Before Marcus could respond, space around the stellar drift began to ripple. 5 collector ships materialized from fold space, their attention focused entirely on the small courier vessel. Marcus realized with cold certainty that they'd been using his battle as cover to approach their real target. All ships, priority. Target shift, he commanded. Protect that courier. The defense fleet pivoted with military precision, pouring fire into the collector formation. But these ships were different from the ones they'd been fighting, larger, more cohesive, with quantum signatures that made his implants screen warnings about dimensional cascade events. Captain, Hayes called out, we're receiving a transmission from the courier vessel. They're requesting permission to come aboard. Granted. Dock them in Bay 3 and get them to the briefing room. Marcus kept his eyes on the tactical display as the collectors pressed their attack. And Hayes? Whatever they want to tell me, I have a feeling it's going to explain a lot. 30 minutes later, Marcus found himself in the Iron Resolve's secure briefing room, staring at the most eclectic group of individuals he'd ever encountered. The salvage operator looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The professor radiated nervous energy, and the pilot seemed to be listening to voices only she could hear. But it was Nissa who commanded his attention. Her violet eyes held depths that suggested she'd seen the death of universes. You've been experiencing anomalies with your cybernetic implants, she said without preamble. Tactical solutions appearing. Without explanation, strategies for fighting enemies that don't exist in any military database. Marcus nodded slowly. The Ocean protocols. That's what my brain keeps calling them. Because that's what they are. Professor Corvus activated a holographic display showing branching timelines and quantum frameworks. The Oceans built mathematical models of warfare across multiple dimensions. Your implants have been accessing their tactical databases. The collectors aren't just trying to destroy our reality, Nissa continued. They're trying to erase the fixed points individuals like you, whose existence creates stability across multiple timelines. Every anchor point they eliminate weakens the barriers between realities. Through the briefing room's reinforced viewport, Marcus watched his fleet exchanging fire with entities that flickered between dimensions. How many realities have they already destroyed? 17 confirmed, Jackson said grimly. Maybe more. They feed on the quantum energy released when universes collapse. Marcus felt his tactical implants processing this information, cross-referencing it with combat data from the past 3 months. The patterns were clear once he knew what to look for. The collectors had been probing their defenses, testing their responses, gathering intelligence about how fixed points operated in combat situations. This was never about the mining colonies. He realized they were using the attacks to study us. And now they're ready for the final phase, Nissa said. A coordinated assault on the nexus point, the Ocean homeworld, where all timeline branches converge. If they can corrupt the quantum framework there, every reality will collapse simultaneously. Zara's AI ghost materialized as a hologram at the conference table, its form flickering with alien harmonics. Massive quantum distortions detected throughout this sector. Reality coherence is dropping below critical thresholds. Through the ship's internal communication system, alarms began sounding. Lieutenant Commander Hayes' voice echoed through the briefing room. Captain, we're detecting cascade events throughout the outer colonies. Entire star systems are disappearing. Marcus stood, his military training taking over, despite the cosmic implications. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less, Corvus said, studying readings from his portable equipment. The collectors are accelerating their timeline. They're going to trigger a multi-dimensional collapse and feed on the resulting chaos. Then we stopped them. Marcus activated his command codes, preparing to issue fleet-wide orders. All ships, prepare for immediate departure to the Corona sector. Priority Alpha protocols are now in effect. Captain, Nyssa said quietly, your fleet won't be enough. The Ashen homeworld is defended by automated systems that require fixed points to operate. We need every anchor point we can find, working together at the Nexus. Marcus looked at his unlikely allies, a salvage operator, a scholar, a courier pilot, and a being who might not entirely exist in their dimension. Against them stood entities that consumed realities for sustenance, armed with weapons that could erase matter from existence. Then we gather every fixed point in known space, he said, and we make our stand at the place where it all began. As the Iron Resolve prepared to jump to hyperspace, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were flying toward the end of everything. But his implants whispered Ashen battle hymns, and for the first time in months, he felt like they had a chance. The final convergence was about to begin. Nyssa had been the last survivor of Timeline Branch Alpha Prime for longer than she cared to count, and watching reality die never got easier. The Ashen homeworld hung before them like a crystalline jewel wrapped in impossible mathematics. Planet-sized construct where the laws of physics bent themselves into origami patterns. Ancient spires twisted through dimensions that had no names, their surfaces covered in script that pulsed with the heartbeat of creation itself. By all the stars, Professor Corvus whispered from the bridge of the Iron Resolve. It's beautiful. It's dying, Nyssa corrected, her form flickering as she struggled to maintain coherence in normal spacetime. The quantum framework is collapsing. Faster than projected. We have minutes, not hours. Around the Nexus world, space itself was coming apart. Collector ships emerged from wounds in reality, like antibodies responding to an infection, their void black holes drinking the light of dying stars. Behind them came something worse, a massive entity that existed in more dimensions than human perception could process, its presence causing nearby asteroids to simply stop existing. The Prime Collector, Jackson said, his salvage operators. Identifying the impossible geometry. That's what's been coordinating the attacks. Marcus studied the tactical display, his cybernetic implants processing Ashen battle data at superhuman speeds. Our fleet won't last 5 minutes against that thing. The fleet isn't meant to fight it, Nyssa said. You are. She gestured to the planet below, where massive structures were rising from the crystalline surface towers of pure mathematics that reached into folded space. Ancient Ashen technology, dormant for eons, responding to the presence of fixed points. The Nexus amplifies quantum signatures, Corvus explained, consulting his research data. If enough anchor points can reach the core chamber simultaneously, their combined resonance should reinforce the dimensional barriers across all timeline branches. Should? Zara asked, her ship's AI ghost manifesting as a nervous hologram. Beside her, the Ashens left detailed instructions, Nyssa said. But they were written for their species, not humans. We're about to attempt something that's never been tried with fixed points of your quantum configuration. Through the viewport, the collector fleet began its final approach. Reality warped around their passage, stars aging millennia in seconds. Space folding in on itself like paper in a fire. The Prime Collector's attention turned toward the Nexus world, and where its gaze fell, the ancient Ashen structures began to flicker. All ships, attack Formation Omega, Marcus commanded. By U.S. time to reach the surface. The Colonial Defense Fleet spread out in a desperate holding pattern, their weapons targeting the smaller collector vessels, while carefully avoiding the prime entity. Marcus knew they were delaying the inevitable, but delay was all they needed. Nissa led them through the Ocean City's impossible architecture, past spires that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously and bridges made of crystallized time. Other fixed points had arrived individuals from across known space who'd received the quantum call, people whose dreams had been filled with Ocean script and cosmic responsibility. There were 12 of them in total. Not enough, according to the ancient calculations, but all they could gather before reality finished collapsing. The core chamber was a sphere of pure mathematics, its walls covered in equations that described the relationship between consciousness and quantum mechanics. At the center floated a construct that hurt to look at directly, the original quantum framework, the foundation upon which all realities were built. "Everyone take a position around the perimeter," Nissa instructed. "When I give the signal, focus your consciousness on your quantum signature. Let the framework recognize you as anchor points." "What about you?" Jackson asked. Nissa smiled sadly. "I'm already dead, remember? My timeline collapsed 3 years ago. I've been borrowing existence from the spaces between realities." Her form began to stabilize as the chamber's energies flowed through her. "But here, at the Nexus, I can be real again. At least long enough to see this through." The chamber shuddered as collector weapons struck the planet's surface. Through the quantum barriers, they could hear the death screams of collapsing dimensions, the sound of universes being devoured by entities that fed on cosmic chaos. "Now," Nissa commanded. The fixed points focused their consciousness inward, feeling for the quantum signatures that made them special, that made them anchor points across multiple realities. The chamber responded, ancient Ocean technology interfacing with human minds in ways its creators never intended. Consciousness exploded outward. Suddenly, Nissa could see all of it, every timeline branch, every probability cascade, every moment, where reality had chosen one path over infinite others. She saw Jackson across 1,000 different lives, sometimes a salvage operator, sometimes a pilot, once even a professor like Corvus. She saw Zara flying between stars that didn't exist, carrying messages between realities that had never been born. And she saw Marcus, the soldier, fighting wars that spanned dimensions, his tactical implants guided by Ocean protocols designed to protect the quantum framework itself. They were all connected, all part of the same vast equation that kept existence stable. And now, finally, they were all in the same place at the same time, their combined quantum signatures resonating with the Nexus world's ancient machinery. The framework responded. Barriers between dimensions solidified, reality asserting itself with mathematical certainty. The collector ships found themselves suddenly unable to phase through normal matter, their void weapons ineffective against targets that existed with absolute quantum certainty. But the prime collector was stronger, older, more experienced at consuming realities. It pressed against the reinforced barriers, its multidimensional form seeking weaknesses in the newly stabilized framework. "It's not enough," Corvus gasped, blood trickling from his nose as his consciousness interfaced with cosmic mathematics. "We need more anchor points or a different approach." That's when Nissa understood what the Oceans had really built. "The Nexus isn't just an amplifier," she said, her voice echoing across multiple dimensions. "It's a lock. And we're not the keys, we're the tumblers." She began to phase shift, moving between timeline branches while maintaining her connection to the quantum framework. One by one, she gathered echoes of the other fixed points versions of Jackson and Zara, and Marcus and Corvus from realities that had never existed, possibilities that had been cut short by collector attacks. Ghost images of the anchor points appeared around the chamber, hundreds of potential cells all contributing their quantum signatures to the framework. The mathematical lock began to turn, reality clicking into place with cosmic certainty. The prime collector's scream was a sound. that existed in frequencies beyond human hearing, a noise that registered as pure entropy made manifest. Its multidimensional form began to collapse as the barriers between realities solidified, cutting off its access to the quantum chaos it fed upon. One by one, the collector ships found themselves trapped in normal spacetime, vulnerable to Marcus's fleet and the Ashen homeworld's automated defenses. Void weapons guttered out, reality warping drives failed, and entities that had devoured 17 timelines suddenly found themselves mortal. "The framework is stabilizing," Corvus reported, his voice weak but triumphant. "Dimensional barriers are holding steady across all monitored reality branches." Nyssa felt the chamber's energies flowing through her, offering her a choice. She could return to the spaces between realities, continue existing as a borrowed fragment of a dead timeline. Or she could accept the Ashen's final gift, a permanent position as guardian of the quantum framework, eternal sentinel against future threats to the multiverse's stability. She looked at her fellow fixed points, these accidental heroes who'd saved existence itself through sheer stubborn refusal to let reality collapse. They would return to their lives, Jackson to his salvage operations, Zara to her courier runs, Marcus to his military career, Corvus to his research. But they would remember, and when reality needed them again, they would answer the call. "Someone has to watch the barriers," Nyssa said, her form beginning to merge with the chamber's crystalline walls. "Someone has to make sure the collectors never return." As her consciousness expanded to encompass the quantum framework itself, Nyssa felt a deep satisfaction. The multiverse was safe, reality was stable, and the fixed points would continue, their leaves as anchors against the chaos that always pressed at the edges of existence. Somewhere in the spaces between realities, she would stand guard, eternal protector of the impossible mathematics that kept everything from falling apart. The Ashen's greatest creation lived on, and the tethered ones had finally come home.